We were called to Namibia on a ministry tour. And so this little video production is all the behind the scenes and the extras, which I'd like to share with you. So to begin with, when we landed in Namibia, it was really interesting because they had painted the map of Namibia on the floor of the airport building. And I just thought that was a nice touch. It was a nice welcome. I'm guessing that if you think of Namibia, you probably think deserts. But there are also long tar roads that go on and on and on, and there's absolutely nothing happening on the left or on the right. But you do see the odd camels here and there. I mean, it is the desert after all. However, there are also little towns dotted here and there through the desert, one such town being Swakopmund. It's on the coastline, this little town of Swakopmund, and in the distance there you can see that bridge. The interesting thing about bridges in Namibia is they're actually bridges over rivers, but a lot of the time the rivers are dry, but they do come flooding through once a year or so, so the bridges are important. So thank you to the engineers who build bridges. So here we are heading into the town of Swakopmund. It looks like any little town if you think about it. It's just a small town. But the thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is the German colonial architecture that is pretty dominant throughout the town. In fact, the whole town of Swakopmund is very strongly German-based. And the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to, which is really very incidental, but I wanted to tell you about it anyway, and that is previously when we were in Swakopmund, we went to this place that made the most amazing German pastry. So, of course, we had to stop there. There it is, that white building. We had to stop in and get ourselves some German pastries for our long road trip to Windhoek, which I'll be taking you on just now to show you the journey from here in Swakopmund all the way to Windhoek. A very, very long, straight road with nothing on either side. But look, we got our pastries and they were yummy. It was well worth stopping for. But we have to head on to Windhoek. As I mentioned, we are eating our yummies on the way. That's why we stopped to get some lovely pastries, some lovely German pastries. And on our way out of Swakopmund, you're going to see the German colonial architecture that I was speaking of, with the odd modern architecture thrown in here and there. But it was just a very interesting little town to visit, and I'm glad we were able to capture some of it to share with you. So as we travel through Swakopmund, there's going to be a few things I'm sure you're going to notice. You can't help but notice them. Palm trees, because I'm sure you gathered by now that they've actually planted all these palm trees. In fact, I'm going to show you something a little bit later about how this deserted place in Namibia, suddenly a little area or a little town, a little development pops up. But before I share that with you, I have a very interesting story to tell you of a place that we stopped at on our way out of Swakopmund, and it's a place called Slowtown. The reason we stopped here specifically was to meet up with a lady who takes care of the elephants that are being hurt in the elephant corridor, as they call it, in Namibia. This lady has made it her life's work to protect the animals that are being, the elephants specifically, that are being slaughtered in this elephant corridor of Namibia. I was very passionate about meeting with this lady and learning all I could because I have a particular interest in elephants. In fact, they are my favorite wildlife animal. And in actual fact, I collect elephants. I have to admit, I have more elephants than I should have, but I am an elephant collector. I love elephants. I've studied them, and hence our having to stop at Slowtown. So we had coffee with this wonderful lady, learned lots of things about the elephants and what she was doing for them. Of course, the most worthwhile thing about that visit was meeting with this wonderful lady that is helping the elephants. But I have to say, the coffee was also really, really good. That's another thing we're passionate about, is our coffee. So here we are, continuing our journey through Swakopmund. And once again, I'm sure you can't help but notice this German colonial influence throughout the town of Swakopmund, the architecture specifically. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we discovered while traveling through Namibia was these developments that just pop up out of the desert. It's quite interesting, actually. So I want to show you that, which I'll show you shortly. Right now, we're just leaving Swakopmund, and we thank Swakopmund too. It says, thank you for your visit, and thank you too, Swakopmund. We enjoyed our visit. And bye-bye palm trees. But we will be seeing more palm trees just now when I show you one of these developments that have popped up out of the desert. But on our way to these sudden developments, this is what we see. Not far out of the town of Swakopmund, we turn right and we come across this. You'll see in this photo that there's a water pipe on the left and the right of the photo and what appears to be like a bridge or a hump that goes over the water pipe. We were fascinated by these long rows of water pipe running through the Namibian desert. It was really quite interesting. And obviously people need to get water to the town. And so now I'm going to show you the little town that suddenly pops up like a little oasis. But this is a man-made oasis, as you can see. If you look carefully, we are actually heading into what looks like a natural oasis, but it's not. This oasis has been built. And I'm just going to take you through it quickly, this little development outside of Swakopmund, because it was quite fascinating. As we drive, please notice this. Look at the roads. They just get covered in sand. So imagine if there's a sandstorm that you can hardly see the road. It's just sand right across the whole road. It's quite something, actually. It's quite hazardous driving in Namibia. It's not terribly hazardous, however, driving through this development. So I'm going to show you as we drive through. As you'll see, all these houses look quite similar, and they've used the same kind of architecture throughout. They've used the sand of the desert. Obviously, they've got that in abundance, but also the rock and the stone. One gets the sense of this development rising up out of the desert, as it were. Once again, you'll see all the palm trees, so many palm trees. In fact, everything here in this development has been planted by man. And do you remember those water pipes that I showed you as we came into this development? Well, there now you see the tractor with the big tanker and the men getting the water pipes out to be able to provide those that are living in this development with water. And more palm trees. And now we're back on the road. See the water pipe to the right? And picnic site, which I'll tell you more about just now. This is a site we saw all the way along from here to Windhoek, which was a good few hours. And they would just suddenly pop up. So ahead of us was just what you see here. And then every now and then you'd see one of those little picnic sites just pop up on the side there, and we could then stop if we needed to. But I also wanted to show you about these trucks now. There are a lot of trucks on this road. Obviously, this is their means of transport from one town to the other. But as I mentioned before, it is quite hazardous driving these Namibian roads, not just because of sand and sandstorms, but also there's this sense of the cars just appearing out of the haze. I'll see if we can try and show it to you here. So what makes driving these Namibian roads so dangerous is, one, when you go to pass a truck, which there are many of, you can't really tell if there's somebody coming the other way. And you'll see here that these cars that are lined up behind this truck are going to pull out and pass it at some point. And that is when it gets hazardous. The other thing that was very obvious in Namibia was, if there's a mountain or a hill, then you put a tower on it, because you know why. We need towers for electricity and internet and all those good things. And we continue on the long road to Windhoek. There's a lot of good that comes out of a long road trip. But the one thing that I really felt prominent in my thinking and my thoughts while we were doing this travel through Namibia was the constant thought that kept on going over and over in my mind, and that was how this must be one of God's favorite places. Because, he says, "Be still and know that I am God." And this place really, really captures that sense of stillness and nothingness and quietness and vastness. And I just kept on thinking, God must love Namibia. This must be one of his favorite places. And that was just a prominent thought that I had throughout this journey. But of course, there's lots of other good things about long road trips, especially when they are quiet and you've got time to reflect. There certainly isn't that sense of rush, rush, rush from one town to the next and lots of traffic, as you can see, although it is hazardous, as I shared. But, next thing you found yourself arriving at the next town after many hours of just nothingness. And then what is the first thing we see on arrival in a new town in Namibia? A car wash. It seems appropriate after being on the long, dusty road. I also wanted to share something else that stood out for me through our journey through Namibia. And that was we saw a church in every town we went through. It wasn't as if it was tucked away somewhere. It was very, very prominent. And I just thought that was quite significant. I'll be sharing more on that. The other significant thing were these lovely big signs. Have a safe journey. Thank you. We will have a safe journey. They were before and after every town. I really appreciated that. Thank you, Namibia. The other thing that we noticed was that as we arrived at towns, the vegetation changed quite notably. And this is natural. It's not man-made. But it was just interesting to us that where the areas of, more vegetation and shrubbery, and as you can see, there's grass. It's not only desert sand. And here we are at Karibib. I do apologize if I'm not pronouncing the names of these places correctly. I'm sure I'm not. Because, for example, look at that sign, Amaruru or something. So, again, apologies. I'm not really pronouncing them as I should. But here we go through this little town called Karibib. And when I say little, I mean little. These are really small towns. I think they've got one street down the center, and it's not even all that long a street either, mind you. So anyway, this is just an example of a town in Namibia that you pass through, and then you drive many, many kilometers or miles through the desert land, and then you come across the next little town. And then once again, we have one of the famous Namibian signs. So once again, thank you, Namibia. And we're on the road again, off to Okahanga. As you can see, it's 112 kilometers. That's going to be our next stop. And this is what we'll be experiencing for 90% of the way of those 112 kilometers, is what you're seeing here. So while we're driving through this nothingness, I wanted to tell you another little story. And the reason why we're going back to Okahanga, we've actually been there on our way down to Swakopmund, but we're going back there again because something happened when I was in Okahanga, a couple of amazing things actually. But before I tell you about those amazing things, I'll just tell you this little practical thing. As we're going back to Okahanga, because I left my Bible there, I felt as though I had lost my left arm, to be honest. And I know I could go and get another Bible, but this was my precious Bible. So I had to go back and fetch it. But let me tell you the story about what happened when we arrived at Okahanga the first time on our way through down to Swakopmund. We had been in Okahanga maybe 5 minutes, not even, when the phone rang. And the mom on the phone said to me that she would like to ask me about Oikos because she would like to home educate her children. So I asked this mom whereabouts she was located, and I'm sure you know what's coming next. She said Okahanga. Would you believe that? So I told her that we had just arrived in Okahanga and we were right here, and maybe if she knew of a place where we could meet and I could get together with her and I could talk to her. And so that happened just down the road, literally a few blocks down the road. We met at a little coffee house, her and her husband and her children, and we just had the most amazing time. I just was amazed by the hand of God in the whole situation. So I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that I left my Bible at this place because I was just so excited about everything. But anyway, it's the first time I've ever left my Bible anywhere. Here we are at the Kaya guest house. This is where we were staying, and this is where I left my Bible that we had to come back to Okahanga to fetch. So that's the story of Okahanga, something that will never be forgotten. Something else I wanted to share with you is this site here, these stalls on the side of the road. This is a very common sight in Africa, all over Africa. So wasn't a surprise to see it in Namibia as well. And now we're on our way to Windhoek, only 68 kilometers to go. And we're going over one of the bridges over the dry riverbed. And farewell to Okahanyan. Thank you for your sign again. And back on the road we go to Windhoek. And there's something else I want to show you that we saw pop up all the way down this road as we were traveling through Namibia. And that was those. Look at that. It was so interesting. We're not 100% sure what they are. Maybe you can research and find out. But we were 100% sure of the temperature, 37 degrees in spring. And that was a cool day. And now I want to tell you about Mr. Big Red Truck. I was very grateful for this truck. We followed him for a very, very long time, and I just felt safe. It was as though I felt the hand of God just protecting us. He was going at a nice, comfortable pace, and we could just sit behind him and enjoy the journey with this sense of protection. Oh, and there's the warthog sign. I suppose that's something you'll only really see in Africa. So back to the red truck. The message that I felt I was receiving from this truck was just how God goes before us. Unfortunately, I never got to meet the driver of this red truck, and I don't think you'll ever know how much prayer he got while we traveled behind him. I was thanking God for him all the way. After spending time in thanksgiving to God for the driver of the red truck, I then found myself praying for the driver of this bakkie, because it just upsets me so much when I see people on the back of an open bakkie. In this instance here, there are 3 men standing on the back of a bakkie on the highway. I just think, what about their safety? What if that driver had to suddenly, put brakes on because of an emergency? What would happen to those men? Okay, they're holding on, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're chatting and they're not actually being careful themselves. And I realize there's railings around the bakkie and so on. But anyway, I'm just taking this opportunity to ask people to please consider the safety of those that they are transporting. And now we are arriving in Windhoek after our long journey through the desert. We had a few Oikos meetings in Windhoek and some ministry as well. We did a video series on the various meetings that we had in ministry that you'll be able to find if you're interested in them. You'll find that on YouTube. But here we are in Windhoek, and you'll see that this is now the city. There's bridges and highways and, more developed area, built up area. But I wanted to specifically focus on showing you something, another one of those stories of when we arrived at Windhoek. We were so, so, so blessed by this family that met us at the airport, and they took us to their home. And then they handed us the keys of their car and said, there you go, off you go, you can use our car. And it is in that very car that we drove all around down to Swakopmund and to Okahanyan and back and up and down and around through the desert using their car. So I was just very, very blessed. Once again, just amazed at God's provision and just so blessed by the generosity and kindness of people. And here we are arriving at the home of the family that blessed us with their vehicle, as well as many other ways that we were blessed by this family. They were very, very precious, and we're very thankful for them. So as you've probably gathered by just watching through this, thank you for watching up till now. But I just wanted to say that the thing that we took from Namibia was, as I mentioned before, be still and know that I am God. And we just experienced so much of that during our filming and recording of our time through this journey that we were on, this ministry tour through Namibia. And I'd love to be able to give you a sense of that stillness and that nothingness. Actually, I spoke more about that on the series that we did on the Oikos YouTube channel, if you want to go and watch that. But for now, let me just leave you with some of these images. Here we are just driving, once again, desert and sand on both sides. But this time you'll notice that we've got the ocean on the right. So it's just quite spectacular, really, the sense of this huge expanse. And just experiencing God, that was the most profound thing for me, was the experience of experiencing God in a new way, in a way that was so deeply moving because it was so still. Be still and know that I am God, is what he says. We pulled in here at this little spot because we noticed some fishermen. I thought, how wonderful that fishermen can come down to this seaside and throw a line into the water and catch some fish. What a treat. And in the distance there, you will see a shipwreck. And that is not an uncommon sight on the shores of Namibia. Look at that spectacular ocean. Something to behold. I hope the fisherman caught a fish. And here we are back on the road, and look what you can see. Namibian desert and the ocean. Isn't it lovely? I mean, this certainly does not do it justice. You need to visit Namibia for yourself. I hope you can one day, maybe. If you do decide to go visit Namibia, and if you are able, one thing that's worthwhile doing is trying to climb Dune 7, one of the highest dunes in the world. Of course, this photograph, you can't see the angle and the height, but look at our celebration when we get to the top. And finally, let me leave you with this. How small are we, and how great is God? Just look at that. Such a picture of nothingness and stillness, yet so much power and so much greatness. So thank you for joining me on our little journey through Namibia. I hope it's been a blessing to you. I'm just going to leave you now without anything more to say as you look at this photo, and I just really trust and hope that you would have been encouraged, inspired, and blessed.